guys, this is Val from valkayink, and today on Anime Suggestion, we are talking about something I believe you've heard of before, Diabolik lovers. This one I got a ton of suggestions for when I did one of my Q&A videos, and we got into the topic of guilty pleasure anime, and that was the guilty pleasure anime that so many of you suggested. Actually, a lot of you in anonymous messages actually suggested to me, so I thought that was fascinating. And I was too intrigued, I had to jump in and watch this series. Now stick with me on this. I don't know if you guys have an idea of how I would feel about this. Maybe this review is not going where you think it's going. When it comes to Diabolik lovers, my first impression was I walked into a hotel room where a kink was going on that wasn't my own, and instead of walking out, I decided to pull up a chair and just say, hey, what are you guys doing? Basically, Diabolik Lovers is this reverse harem based on an otome game where this girl Yui is dropped off at this kind of gothic, mansion-y kind of castle, and these vampires basically own her. So that is the concept that we're dealing with. Honestly, I don't really like this anime, but that's not what I want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about is the good portions of this anime, because this anime does certain things really, really well, and I don't think we should just gloss over that, even if you're not a fan of the subject matter itself. Granted, a lot of this is on me. I'm not the biggest fan of vampires. I know that's somebody's really big kink, that some people really are attracted to that. It's just not my thing personally, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. A lot of this anime is really kind of based around Yui's interaction with these vampires, as it should be. But the parts that I found myself drawn to were the visual elements of this anime. Basically, they have this really unique design where there's a lot of black, a lot of shadow used in everything. They have these almost pale, firelit colors. They have a lot of antique objects in the world, like old furniture, antique phones. It gives you this strange out-of-world feeling, and this anime is so good at building up its atmosphere. Now, atmosphere is really when you feel like you're kind of encased in another type of world and you're kind of in a trance by it. And I think that's what this anime does so well. Now, when we come to the characters, Yui, of course, is pure innocence. Her visual design exudes that. She's very softly colored, a lot of very round shapes. She's very little. She's very intimidated, and then the vampires themselves kind of look like visual idols, which is par for the course when it comes to otome games. Now, the thing that I really love in this series in particular is not so much the interactions with Yui and the vampires, it's not so much all just the atmosphere. There are some legitimately good, creepy sections to this anime that I fell in love with. And so those creepy sections coupled with the atmosphere really gave this whole anime this dark fantasy feeling. And I think that's what draws so many people in, especially people that are used to a lot of otome games or who are used to a lot of reverse harems. Now, I like this creepy fantasy that this anime builds up, and I really enjoyed those creepy sections. This is the reason why Laito is one of my absolute favorites out of vampires, because I think he has one of the best creepy sections. If you guys have seen it, which I think a lot of you have since a lot of you talked to me about this, it is the telephone section. Yui throughout this ordeal is trying to escape. She's trying to leave the mansion, but the mansion and the vampires keep messing with her, and time really feels distorted. The longer you go in this series, the more you can't remember exactly what day it is, the more you can't remember what time it is. Yui's always passing out, waking up in the middle of the night. Yui's always being taken down by the vampires, of course the whole biting, sucking thing, of course. You as a viewer also get kind of caught up in the fact that you can't figure out the time of day. And the more time she spends in this dark fantasy, the more she kind of yields to it and the more she resists escaping. She actually gets a lot of opportunities where somebody hands her a knife, or she might have a weak moon, which affects their powers. She still doesn't leave. She just can't, I guess. Anyway, back to the scare that I liked so much. She basically still has enough fight where she escapes the school I don't know why the vampires still have to go to school at night. That's just part of it. She escapes the school and she actually reaches a working telephone, and so many times in this series she's not finding shit. So she gets to this working telephone after running away from Leto, the vampire, and she picks it up and she's trying to call out. She's so excited, she finally has the moment, only to hear Leto's voice on the other end of the line. And as she turns and looks out of the phone booth, she sees Leto and he's just smiling at her, and it's one of the best creepy, chilly feelings you get out of this series. I really like those elements to this. Now, as good as those elements are, there are a lot of problems with this series. The plot is not very good. You can look up any review and really get an idea of why the plot doesn't work in this. Anyway, the plot's really there to set up all of these interactions. The other problem that I have with this series in particular is the fact that whenever I'm watching something that's a reverse harem or based on an otome game, you're supposed to either feel like, ooh, I want this boy to end up with the main character, or ooh, I want that boy for myself. And the problem I had is I really didn't like any of the characters, and I especially didn't want any of them to end up with Yui, and I certainly didn't want to end up with any of them myself. Basically, this otome game is a unique blend where most otome games give you this kind of huge list of characters to choose from, and there might be one asshole character or one kind of more sadistic character. This is an anime that gives you a whole range of assholes to choose from. And for someone that loves that character type, that dynamic, that creepy dark fantasy, I can see this being an amazing anime for you. My dog's all upset. Now for me, I didn't like anybody, and so I found very little drive to watch it. Basically, I was watching for all of these weird, creepy interactions that she would have with the vampires, more than the actual show itself. Now, I want to say, when it comes to this show, they did something very, very clever. And when you have a niche market, for example, otome games have this small market of people who really love these types of games, who really love these dating sims, who really love this kind of morbid fantasy sometimes, or like this very sweet sugary fantasy, and you really have to differentiate yourself to grasp part of that market. That's what Diabolik Lovers did, and they went above and beyond, because when it came to animating their series, it really feels like instead of trying to water it down and make it appeal to a mass market, they decided to double down on what they've already established and give their core fans these scenes that they love out of the game. And that's what a majority of this anime is. Now, it's actually a very smart move on their part because they know they're not going to appeal to a mass market, but they do know that if they do well enough, their niche audience might buy 2 or 3 copies of the anime itself. It's a win-win scenario for them to keep it like this. Now, when it comes to this anime, I watched Diabolik Lovers subtitled completely on Crunchyroll, and I think I hopped into the dub for about 2 minutes before I shut that off completely. If you want a more in-depth review and more discussion about the dub for this, I do recommend 2 episodes that you guys should watch of Dub Talk. They reviewed not only the first season of Diabolik Lovers, but also the second season, and they are amazingly insightful as well as entertaining, and I will leave links to those episodes down below for you guys. So while this anime may not have been for me, I actually love seeing it and seeing what it meant. It's nice to see how a company decided to market their product. And it does have these elements that, like I said, I think they did really well. Now, if we jump over to the second season is a lot more blunt. They kind of take away the fantasy element a little bit. They give it a more normal home feeling. They give you a new set of vampires that are half human, half vampire, have lived a human life. Now, the problem with this, for me in particular, they feel a lot meaner than the original vampires. You kind of can't blame the vampires for being what they are, but when you have a scenario where she's dropped in with these half-vampires who were human and do remember those types of emotions, they kind of play her up and kind of butter her up, only to knock her down even harder. And it's really hard for me to even get through the second season, but the second season still has these really good moments. It has these core moments with their characters that I really love. My absolute favorite being the teddy bear scene. I'm not gonna even talk about it, but I love that scene. That scene, I literally had to pause the episode. I was laughing so hard. But there's also these very human elements where they're talking about their own pasts and their own pain, and she kind of relates to them, and you as a viewer feel for them. Ultimately, there's still different flavors of vampire that I'm just not into. However, I think it's a-okay for you guys to freely admit that it's one of your favorite guilty pleasure animes. You don't have to hide it behind an anonymous button, especially not with me. I totally get it, and I support you guys 100%. And if you support this anime, you should buy it yourself. Anyway, as far as a verdict, I only recommend this to strict otome reverse harem fans. You'll get a new flavor of a reverse harem, and I think that's exciting. And to everyone else, just skip this one unless you really want to see some of the creepy elements. But honestly, if you watch enough horror anime, they're not going to go above and beyond for you. And as far as me purchasing it, I'm gonna pass. I don't want to buy this one. But hey, I'm really happy you guys suggested this. Now that I have watched this one though, I'm curious about reverse harems, and I'm wondering if there's a show that I could really fall in love with in the category. I've only seen a few in my past, this isn't my wheelhouse, but I'm always willing to watch more. Anyway guys, this has been Anime by Suggestion by me, Val. Again, I'm looking for anime suggestions from my subscribers, and it has to be an anime I haven't seen yet as I expand these anime horizons. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hi to all my subscribers, you guys rock, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye! Mwah.